Welcome in, LSU fans, to the Go 24/7 podcast. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Glen West. And if you're watching this, maybe you're watching this late Thursday night, but you're seeing it on the site on Friday as we get ready for another game inside Tiger Stadium, Glen. LSU, UCLA. The best way to kind of start off this podcast, Glen, is that kind of what we talked about with the Bruin Report Online, our sister site over there on the West Coast. When this game was initially scheduled, there was some excitement. Two big brands, two historic brands in the college athletics landscape meeting up. And, for both fan bases, an opportunity to travel to a stadium, with the home and home where you haven't been. Obviously, LSU went out to California a few years ago. Now the Bruins returned the favor, but this matchup, you and I were kind of talking off air. It's the UCLA faithful. They're going to show up to experience Tiger Stadium, but I don't know if it's going to be too kind to them. Not getting ahead of myself here, but it's a UCLA team that's definitely in rebuild mode in year one under Deshaun Foster.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of years ago when Brian Kelly first took the job, if you were hoping for that Kelly on Kelly matchup from a UCLA perspective, that's out the window here as we kind of get going with this matchup. I think this is a wildly different team than even 7-8 months ago when that whole thing went down with Chip Kelly and him leaving the program and leaving it in a pretty bad place, I must say. I mean, we've been LSU fans know how kind of bad it was towards the end of the Ed Orgeron era. And look, Ed did a lot of great things for the program, and but the way it was left, it was a lot of work for Brian Kelly to get there. And Deshaun Foster's in the same kind of boat right now in year one with this team. And so we're I think this is going to be a matchup that a couple of years ago you would have been a little more excited for, but still this is a really good opportunity for LSU to work on a lot of things. And we'll get into a little bit of it here, but it's definitely not what I had envisioned it 4 years ago when you went to the Rose Bowl Stadium and lost 38-27, gave up explosive plays left and right. Maybe we'll see the explosive plays thing carry on, but hopefully it's more from an LSU perspective than a UCLA one.
Yeah, it's just two programs, and specifically a program. And I mentioned this with David Woods. I know you did the written portion with him. I did the podcast version. College football is better when a brand like UCLA is better, and so it's one of those historical. Obviously, you mentioned Rose Bowl, just a historical venue as well. So UCLA comes into town. Glenn, they really struggled against an Indiana team that's under a first-year head coach. Indiana hit on some explosive plays. They got to the quarterback. One of the biggest takeaways, and maybe where we kind of start with this, was UCLA has not done a good job of protecting their quarterback. They haven't done a good job being able to get into essentially what they want to do offensively. It's hindered them both in the run game and the passing game. And so this feels like, from the LSU perspective, a chance to build upon a second half where LSU flashed in the pass rush. They flashed, in the run defense category, save for a couple explosive plays. Savion Jones could be a field day type of game for him, it feels like. But a couple other guys could get involved as well. Even some of the younger players. We've seen Gabriel Relaford really kind of take more snaps as Deshaun Womack has been out of the fold. So kind of your thoughts on what kind of opportunity this pass rush has against an offense that's really kind of sputtered through the early portion of the season.
Yeah, I mean, the one guy you just didn't mention there was Braden Swinson, who just had 3 sacks and a forced fumble and 8 pressures the last week against South Carolina. So, yeah, I do think this is a game here where LSU can be aggressive and really lean into this havoc, whatever you want to call it, attack style defense that Blake Baker wants to have. I think we saw it in bits and pieces last week against South Carolina, particularly in the second half when Sellers went out. I mean, we don't have to rehash that game, but I think it's definitely played a role that they were having to go against Ashford in the second half as opposed to Sellers, who had just spent 20-30 minutes carving them up. So I think it's important here for LSU to get off to a fast start. I've written about this a ton this week, and just kind of how LSU just hasn't been able to get off to these great starts to begin games. And you saw it against South Carolina, you saw it against Nichols, you saw it not being able to convert on some early opportunities against USC. I would love for this defense to come out and make a couple of game-changing plays in the first half, give the LSU offense some great field position. I'd like for the LSU offense to capitalize in the red zone when they get their opportunities. I'd like to see
Mhm.
just a lot of positives, at the beginning of this game, as opposed to maybe coming out of the gates a little bit slow. And so, yeah, that was one of the things that I asked Brian Kelly about on Thursday. And I'm sure a lot of you will be seeing this on Friday, Saturday, hopefully before the game. What has kind of gone into these slow starts, and just how
Yeah.
has this kind of happened to you guys for a couple games in a row? And BK said essentially they've spent the last 2 weeks kind of going over that exact problem, and they said they've arrived to the stadium 30 minutes before they usually do on a typical road game. In terms of what they're doing in practice, they don't typically do this, but the last 2 weeks they've started with 11 on 11 stuff, and really kind of been aggressive at the beginning of practice to kind of get the juices flowing at the beginning of practice. Maybe that kind of bleeds into the game on Saturday, but yeah, they're looking for a lot of different ways in which they can just get off to better starts. And I think it really boils down to here: can LSU eliminate the explosive plays on defense, and can they be more efficient with what they're doing on offense in terms of the run game, and just kind of let the passing game kind of carry them. I mean, like, the
Yeah.
passing game has been what this group has built itself on these first 3 weeks offensively. We're expecting Chris Hilton to get back, which we can touch on a little bit later in the pod. But I know I kind of got off track there with the defensive line question, but I do think the defensive line is going to have to play a part in eliminating, or I guess keeping UCLA from having those explosive plays and getting off to a better start than maybe people think. Because this UCLA offense, I watched a couple of their games. I didn't watch the entirety of their first 2 games because it would have hurt my soul a little bit, but they've averaged 14 and a half points a game. They just
Yeah.
have not had, I think they've had 1 or 2 plays go for over 20 yards in the first couple of games. Like, they've just been stuck in the mud offensively. And Eric Bieniemy, who's their offensive coordinator, has a lot of success going back to his Kansas City days, but you need the personnel too. You need, and I think that's kind of where this program's lacking right now, and where LSU, I think, can take a big advantage on Saturday defensively.
UCLA's quarterback Ethan Garbers is kind of one of the guys that is obviously going to be a name to watch. The quarterback position always is. He hasn't been explosive, and when I was talking with David Woods, he mentioned, hey, they've got some weapons. It's just a chance to be able to get them the football, be able to go through progression and reads. And LSU can disrupt that early, especially behind a Tigers crowd that should be fairly present. It's going to be a warm day, warm afternoon there in Tiger Stadium, but that could help a lot. Now let's play on the other side of the football here for just a second, because you mentioned explosive plays. Look, Garrett Nussmeier's been very good. There's not, really. I know on our message where we had some people complaining about different things during the game. Much like we were in a situation last year, Glenn, talking about this, Garrett Nussmeier is a big reason why you won last weekend at South Carolina, why you've won some of the games you've won. The running back position, now going back to Monday, Brian Kelly did not want to commit to Caden Durham being the lead back. I understand that from a competitive standpoint, all these different things. But logic has to tell you Caden Durham auditioned well enough to continue to build off that performance. What's your expectation in this run game? Do we see a lot of Durham? Do we see maybe a heavier dosage of Caleb Williams as he kind of gets more, or Caleb Jackson, and then obviously Josh Williams? I was combining the two right
Yeah,
there.
I was wondering where you were going with that.
Yeah.
Which one were you talking about?
I think about my fantasy football team, and Caleb Williams let me down, let me
Ouch.
down the other day. So,
Ouch.
yeah, but those three guys in the backfield, and then obviously, is there still a role for Jawan Johnson here? I mean, is that something that's was just kind of needed in an emergency? Kind of your thoughts on this running back room, maybe what we could see on Saturday.
Yeah, I think the best thing that could have happened to LSU was having a game like that last week from Caden Durham. And not just from what he did in terms of the momentum that he gave LSU in the second half in particular, and just the explosive runs that he was able to churn out in that second, third quarter. But it really kind of helps settle down, I think, this running attack. And Kelly mentioned it after that game, like, that's the blueprint for these running backs. Like, he told the media, I think you were there in that press conference, like, this performance is what we want out of you guys going forward. And
Standard.
I think that's important for them to see, because this is still a relatively young backfield outside of Josh Williams. And it's for Caleb Jackson to see it, for like you mentioned, Juwan Johnson to see it. I think that's important in terms of going back and looking at film and making guys miss, and the importance of breaking tackles and seeing hole hit hole hard kind of deal that Durham was able to do for him. So I do expect Durham to kind of be your leader in terms of carries this weekend. I think he's earned that opportunity to go out there and lead the team in carries, or lead that room in carries. But I do think this is going to be still a by committee, running back room. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for Caleb Jackson and Josh Williams, and maybe not as much of Juwan Johnson. I mean, I think probably right now what they need from Juwan Johnson is just that that him to learn the playbook for one, and then just be available for depth. I mean, like I think they have a good thing going with those three, and if you stretch it to four guys and trying to equalize those opportunities, it gets a little tough. And I mean, you saw last year it was mainly the Logan Diggs show, and they had 8 scholarship backs last year that they could have chosen from, and they leaned heavily on Logan Diggs when he was healthy. So I do think this is going to be a 3-horse kind of deal. I would imagine Juwan gets maybe a couple of catches, maybe he gets a carry or something here every once in a while. But I'm also kind of in the camp here of like, ride the hot hand. Like if it was Durham last week, okay, lean into Durham. If Caleb Jackson rattles off a couple of 10, 12, 14-yard runs in the first quarter and the offense is humming, keep them in there. Like I think this running back room is talented enough that if there's a guy that just has it going in this game, you lean into that guy, and hopefully the other guys understand that if this guy's got something going here, then it's important that we lean into it. So I guess that's another long-winded answer there. What's your thoughts on that? On how they kind of split things up with the running backs?
Yeah, I like what you said there about, understanding that the nature of the game or how the game's flowing could determine who's in the game. I felt like last week, LSU got a little predictable. Every single third down, we feel like we saw Josh, Williams on the field, and really kind of in a blocking situation to be an extra guy when Dylan Stewart or Kyle Kennard or one of those South Carolina pass rushers were trying to get after the quarterback. Maybe getting away from that and seeing, okay, if Durham, you feel comfortable with Durham as a blocker, is Caleb Jackson involved as a blocker, to where if a certain player isn't on the field, defenses can't key in on, okay, we know they're probably throwing the ball here. Now, obviously, 3rd and 12, we know, odds are would tell you they're going to throw the football. But I like what you said there, understanding, riding the hot hand, because it really feels like, Glenn, and obviously you've been covering the team and been around the program longer than I have. It's been a while since LSU has had like that feature running back. It doesn't feel like it, and you correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm trying to go back. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was more of a pass catching back on that 2019 team. Maybe
He was their lead dog, though. I mean, by far, he
yeah.
was their lead guy on that team for
In
sure.
terms of just turning around and handing the football off, is Darius Geis, like, do you go back that far? I don't really know in terms of a lead back. So I'm not saying Cade Durham becomes that, but look, if Cade Durham, who's really good in the outside zone runs last weekend, if they really start to feel comfortable with that, and two, Glenn, another aspect is we've talked so much about this offensive line, where Brian Kelly has said we haven't needed to. When we've needed to, we've done it. The fans and media have said they've struggled with running the football. If this offensive line is more comfortable in a gap zone scheme, which is what was working last Saturday, maybe that does mean that Caden Durham is your lead back, because that's what suits him, getting the outside. Caleb Jackson had a nice run coming out of halftime last week, with that. I think a lot of these things, parameters, kind of determine what it could look like. But I would love to see Caden Durham really just continue to evolve as what a lot of us thought he could be coming out of high school. I mean, I think he kind of got, shuffled down the depth chart just because of the names that were there and the experience was there. And then
He didn't
kind of
get
popped off. Like, hey, that
and he
kid's
didn't get there till the summer. Yeah. So
yeah,
like,
that's huge.
yeah. No, I like what you said there about the offensive line, because I did go back last Sunday and I had a pretty fun time charting this, but like all the explosive runs that they had, it was a pretty common theme on the offensive line, where those guys were all working as one. They were and really what they were doing was they were pulling the defensive line right, and they were shifting the linebackers' eyes, thinking that they're going to go right on a play, and then they backdoor it with Durham going on the left hand side, where it's Will Campbell and it's Garrett Dellinger. I mean, that was the kind of the Mason Taylor what they would put in motion and help block on some of those big explosive runs. Like the kind of the misdirection, the counter runs, you mentioned the outside zone runs, those things were working when they hit that B gap and they were able to get to the outside, make a guy miss. That stuff was working for LSU in that South Carolina game. And hopefully it's something that they can continue to lean into, because I will continue to say here, if LSU goes into that Ole Miss game and they still just do not have a identity in the run game or something that they feel like they can lean on, Ole Miss will make them pay. Ole Miss has a very, very talented team, and I know we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here with these next couple of games, but that's really your next big challenge as far as I see it. And I think these next couple of games here allows LSU the opportunity to test a number of different things, lean into maybe what was working last week, and if it can continue, then I think you kind of start having more of an identity in that respect, and it balances out what you can do in the passing game, and I think opens up a lot of different things for you. So yeah, I'm excited to see kind of how if they can back it up, if they can go one game with a pretty decent showing in the run game with another one, and kind of have that snowball effect, and see kind of how the passing game plays off of that.
Well, and then the thing is, you get the bye week on October the 5th. So anything
Yeah.
that you like, now you can really develop that. And you heard it here first. Glen is already sleeping on South Alabama, who dropped 87 points against Northwestern State last weekend.
Yeah, that's a good test for
Hey, LSU fans, if you're tuning in,
look, 87 points is hard to do. I will
it's
give
hard
them
to do
that.
regardless. I
In
can't
a
do that in
college
a
game,
video game.
yeah, you can't do that in a video game. You have high school teams that are just totally dominant over other high school teams that can't do that. So yeah, I'll swallow that one a little bit. But
South Alabama's playing tonight, by the way, if LSU fans want to get an early scouting report here on Thursday night. Glenn, let's kind of wrap it with this. You mentioned it earlier, Chris Hilton kind of rejoining the fray we expect this weekend. The first question I have is, Brian Kelly mentioned, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, maybe going into South Carolina week, or maybe the Nichols game. They're not going to play Hilton until he's 100%. My biggest question is, does that mean he is 100%? I mean, obviously, he lists him as probable. We know that Chris Hilton has battled injuries. I mean, he talked about in the preseason the mental hurdles it has been for him over the course of his career, to a point where he really didn't know if he wanted to play football anymore.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, and this is just how this game works, it's been next man up. Aaron Anderson has really established himself, I feel like, as the number 2 or 3 option, depending on how you look at it.
He's been the number one at times. He's been the number one at times.
You have Kyron Lacey. CJ Daniels had a nice first half against South Carolina, and it was other guys that played in the second half. So where does Chris Hilton fit in all of this? Do they try to force it in there? Because it's been a passing game, Glenn, that you want to get Hilton involved, but you don't want to screw up the chemistry that's kind of happening with the group that's out there on the field. I've been very impressed when they go to the 3 receiver, 1 tight end set, and it's essentially been Lacey and Daniels on one side, on either side, Aaron Anderson in the slot, and then you obviously have Mason Taylor as the tight end. It's been working. How much is the adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it here, but you got to get Chris Hilton involved?
Well, look, I mean, in the fall camp and really in spring as well, they had Hilton working on the outside. So I think that Aaron Anderson's role is going to be pretty much intact. I would imagine Kyron Lacey's is as well. I think if there's an opportunity there, it's going to be in place of a guy like CJ Daniels, who, and look, I think CJ's, they haven't even scratched the surface of what they can do with CJ, but if they can continue to move these guys around a little bit, and CJ talked with us in the fall camp about how they've been moving him around too. He's been working in the slot. He's been working, on the other side opposite of Lacey. So I think that they've done a nice job of getting these receivers ready to kind of have a rotation, and I think that they can get back to that. But what I do want to kind of say here is that Kelly said that it's probable that he'll play on Saturday, but it's also important to note that he's missed a month, and that they're going to probably try to ease him back here over the next couple of weeks, which I think is a great plan. Like, don't throw him out there for 50, 60 snaps if he's not ready for it. Get him a couple of looks, get him a couple of targets, have him run down the field a couple of times, because what I do think this offense is missing right now is a little bit of that vertical threat. I mean, that vertical downfield passing threat. that Hilton showed us in the Wisconsin game, that he showed us in spring camp and fall camp. He's got a natural rapport and chemistry with Nussmeier on those throws, and I think that can be a huge weapon for LSU's offense when he's fully back and fully intact. But get him involved, like get him a couple of targets when he's out there. He doesn't have to be playing, like I said, 40, 50, 60 snaps. What Kelly kind of told us today when the question was asked about just kind of what Hilton can do for this offense, he mentioned a very specific thing that Hilton does, and it's tracking the ball down the field. He says that, Chris is a really good really good at kind of locating the ball down the field, adjusting the way that he needs to, and still being able to make the play to where he can, break a tackle if he needs to, if he's in tough coverage, or if he, has a hole that he can hit down the field. He's good at that. So I'm super pumped that we're finally going to get to see him play, because you're right. This is a guy who has battled through so many injuries, and he was so healthy for most of this offseason that it had to be a little bit crushing to him that he had to miss these first 3 weeks, and that I hate that happened to him. So we'll see kind of what his role looks like. I would love to see him get a couple big catches in this game, really work him back slowly, and then have him really ready for that Ole Miss game, where I think you're going to need all of your big bullets to kind of have a shot and win that kind of game. So yeah, very excited to see what Chris Hilton can do in this passing offense on Saturday.
And I will kind of, as we kind of end that part of the conversation, it's been really also fun to see Xavion Thomas play the receiver and kind of motion him into the running back spot. I don't know if you really picked up on that. That was a lot of fun to see, and I like that. And to add to it, I need to go back, and I would love to kind of chart these plays out and maybe put it on our message board or on social media. They've been able, and we saw this in the South Carolina game, Glenn, they would motion Thomas back there and they'd run with him, but then they would motion him back there and work to the other side on a pass. They would, hand the ball off to the running back that's actually back there. So it feels like that's something that Joe Sloan has said, hey, we like this, and now we're going to give people different looks off of it. So it's a unique group, and Chris Hill has a role. Like you said, get him involved this week, a little more involved against South Alabama, get the bye week to make sure he's 110% healthy, and you essentially have a month until you play Ole Miss. That's when you probably need him full go. And I'll drop this here. I don't know if he's thinking about this. I don't know if anyone's thinking about this, but I guarantee you, when he takes the field against Ole Miss, he's going to remember that game last year where the ball was thrown to him in the end zone, pass interference, whatever you want to call it, whatever it was.
I think it might have been tipped in the end zone, but it still kind of whizzed right by him, kind of thing. Yeah, it was.
That means a lot to him to be able to play that game, especially inside Tiger Stadium. So
no doubt.
You like that Xavion Thomas look though?
Yeah. I mean, I've been pounding the table for more Xavion on our board for the last 2 weeks, and look, I thought he looked really good against Nicholls State. I don't know why he didn't get more involved in the game plan. Maybe it's a little bit of scheme. Maybe it's a little bit on him. I don't know, but that's another weapon here that I think LSU can really could really use. And there's only so much to go around. I get that, and there's other guys that I think can do the job and showed that they can do the job. I mean, look, Kyron Lacey I think's had a really nice start to this year, and we don't talk about him much. It's been the other guys that we've been talking about because it's okay. Kyron's doing his thing, but what about who else is going to step up next to Kyron kind of deal? So it's been a different guy most weeks. I would say the second most consistent player though has been Aaron Anderson, and until he shows you that he isn't that guy, then I think you still got to lean into him and lean into what he does best, which is catching the ball in space and getting downfield quick. I mean, that guy is a quick son of a gun when he gets the ball with a little bit of space, and I'll be excited to see what he can do as well.
All right, it's prediction time. The spread as of we're recording this is LSU minus 24.5. Glenn, that makes me nervous. I'm not going to put Addie's college fun on that just because it would make me nervous. My wife wouldn't like that. But I will say that if you wanted to take that line, watch the preview podcast because the UCLA folks might have you convinced that you probably should take that line. I'll say this, and I'll go first, and then I'll let you have yours. I sat and I have two different scores written down here. The first one for me was 41-17 LSU, which would be right on that, cover line. I guess I can do quick math in my head. But the other one I had was 38-17. LSU wins comfortably, but I don't know. Where do you sit with this? I think LSU should win this game, figure some things out, build
Were you
upon what happened last week. Your thoughts?
were you looking at my prediction piece? It's already in
I
there.
haven't even opened it up. I'm looking
Mine
it up
was
now.
38-17 LSU. That was my prediction.
Great minds think alike. There we go.
Yeah, I'll let you deal with 41-17 if you want to be the homer and go for the 24-point uh, job there. So look, I think LSU wins this comfortably. Whether it's 38-17, 41-13, kind of whatever it takes. I mean, I the one thing I just want to see this team do is come out and put the game away early, start
Yeah.
fast, go up a couple scores. I wouldn't say coast the rest of the way, but just continue to apply pressure the rest of the way and have a fun day. Like, I mean, this should be
Have
a
fun.
game where LSU comes out and plays a little loose, plays free, and can build up a lead early. Maybe force a couple turnovers. Maybe have a big special teams play. A big return from Xavier or something like that. I want to see this team start fast more than anything. Prove that you can do that. Like, I mean, you can't expect to go into these Ole Miss, these Alabamas, these A&Ms on the road, the Oklahoma at the end of the year, get down two or three scores and expect that you're going to come back and win those games. I mean, they have a history of doing that under BK the last couple of years. I don't think it's a way that they particularly like having to do it. So they've proven that they can go out, play complimentary football for 2, 3, 4 quarters to start the game. I think would be a huge win for LSU. So I got LSU winning this thing by 2 or 3 scores, maybe even a little bit more. If we get closer to kickoff and I'm feeling greedy.
Glen's feeling good. If the pregame meal's nice up in the press box,
Yeah, we got to judge the pregame hot dogs. See if the
pregame hot dog. And Glenn, I don't know if this makes a difference. We have to go back and look. LSU did announce about an hour ago they're wearing the purple jerseys, so it'll be purple jerseys at home. I don't know what the
I
kind of
don't think it's going to be sissy blue for UCLA as
What a
the
greatest interview. I wasn't even on the LSU beat, but I will never forget that.
yeah.
Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff.
What's your
LSU,
prediction?
UCLA.
You,
What'd
you're
you say?
going 38-17 too, or 41-17? What's yours?
I'll go in the middle. I'm going 44-20.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right,
I'm going
all right,
44-20. So I'll up the ante. We'll have different ones.
all right.
Obviously, you can check out our predictions and entire game preview and focus over there on the Go 24/7 website. Make sure you get that subscription. Have a good time talking with us. And two, make sure you head over there because it's a nice little visit weekend in terms of recruits. There are going to be some intriguing storylines. So make sure you stay tuned to the message boards for that. And man, college football, LSU football back inside Tiger Stadium for the next 2 weeks. UCLA, South Alabama, a bye week, and then home against Ole Miss. So for the next
So
month, the
a month,
Tigers are not going to be
what
leaving
a month. Yeah.
the state of Louisiana, and I'm glad about that. LSU UCLA kickoff going to be 2:30 Central on Saturday. You can make sure you check that game out on ABC, and we'll catch you next time. We'll have a post game reaction. We'll have everything and more over on Go 24/7. And this is the Go 24/7 podcast. He's Glen West. My name is Bryce Koon. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching.